What a horrible idea that was, Mark, to break into that trailer.
Hey, it wasn't just my idea.
Hey, it worked, didn't it?
And I wasn't there.
Welcome to another episode of Through the Lens of the EMS Wizard podcast. And on this episode, I've got to ask John, what were we really doing the other day in the Gaston rescue truck?
Well, I thought maybe if we got some of those things, they'd have to come looking for it, and we could really capture the chief there to want to come on our show without having to really kidnap him or anything. But as he made it clear, all we had to do was ask. So sorry.
Yeah, I think he kind of called us.
Yeah. Sorry about
Busted.
that.
With your hat on.
Well, it's become a thing.
Yeah.
Everybody always asks, where's Terry and his hat?
It's like my hat has its own identity. Mark, how does it feel? Mark Casey, how does it feel tonight? There's another Mark with us. I guess we'll let you introduce the other Mark since you guys share a name, and it would just be confusing if one of us did.
Well, I will gladly sacrifice my name just so that we can have him here as a guest on the podcast. We have Chief Mark Lamphiear of Gaston County EMS with us on this episode. Chief, thank you very much for joining us.
Absolutely.
So I understand from our conversation the other day in Greensboro that you've been chief for quite a while. So you probably have a really remarkable journey and a lot of knowledge and a lot of skills and everything that you've earned over the years and learned over the years. So just kind of give us a little bit of background about yourself. We'll start off with that.
All right. I'm originally from Oregon. I was actually born in Washington State, and my family moved to Oregon. When I was in high school, we moved to the Oregon coast in Astoria, and that's where I really got into EMS. But of course, like most people, there was a lot of things before that made me be interested, you know?
So you started in EMS in another state. Like, did they do EMT like in a firehouse, in a hospital, in a college? How did you get your EMT?
The class was held in the hospital, but it was a college class.
And was it like a state credential, or did you go straight to the National Registry route?
Yeah, it was a state credential. In Oregon at the time, they had EMT 1, 2, and 3. And 1 was a basic EMT, 2 was an IV tech, and 3 was a cardiac tech. They didn't, I'm dating myself here, but they didn't have paramedics then.
Oh, wow. Well, that's right up Walter's alley.
And that's when Walter had to wait for the state to create paramedic for him.
We did have paramedics. We just did not have paramedics in our county. We actually will be honest with you, I don't know, besides the 2 coastal counties, if any county was paramedic when I got into EMS, actually.
Okay.
Well, Moses was busy at the time.
Shut up, John. You're not
Part in
that
the
old.
Red Sea.
Mm-hmm. But
Hey, Mark, this is what they joke me on all the time. How did you used to receive calls 31 years ago?
Over the radio. I mean, we
Okay.
had pagers and radios.
So we used to have this thing called a hotline that
Oh,
the
God.
dispatch center could call you directly. And, everything was 7-digit numbers when it was first starting. And they joked me about that all the time. They were like, what? How did that happen?
And they would light the lantern outside of the station
Shut
to
up,
signal the rest of the.
Walter would pick up the phone, which had a cord to it back then. Hoy, hoy, clear the party line. I have an emergency. I declare
They give me
an
such a
emergency.
hard time. I can't believe
Operator.
it.
Get the horses out the stable.
Mhm.
Ready the horses.
No.
So Chief, I think the biggest question that a lot of folks are going to have is how does one go from an Oregon duck to a North Carolina Tar
Tar
Heel.
Heel.
How do you,
Yeah.
yeah, how do you end up out here?
Well, I had sort of worked my way up as far as I could where I lived and worked, and I wanted to do more in EMS, and I loved it there, and I didn't want to leave, but I knew I was going to have to if I wanted to continue to advance myself, and I got some good stories from back then too. You know, things I said I'd never let happen if I was in charge of an EMS agency, but I started looking around because I knew I was going to have to go somewhere, and I was a finalist at several different places, but this is the one that worked out.
So did you come into Gaston as a ranking officer, or did you come in as a paramedic and have to work your way up?
I came in as the director, and later the title was changed to chief.
Oh, okay. So when was that? Like,
You really want to know? It
I
was in
think
1992.
that's awesome. So when we were talking and trying to get some background on it, someone said been at Gaston for 32 years. And I think they had said been the chief for 32 years. And I think when I was talking to Terry, he was like, wait, he's been the chief for 32 years? And I was like, well, I don't know. Well, I have
And
to ask.
John's confusion was what kind of pin do you get at 30 years of service? Mostly because he will never see one unless it's like a picture of somebody else.
You'll get
But
to see yours.
yeah, yeah.
I believe that's probably going to make you the longest tenured chief in North Carolina as far as EMS goes.
Well, people ask me, it kind of bothers me a little bit. Like, when are you going to retire? And I usually tell them when I stop having fun, you know?
Oh,
There you
But,
go.
I got a few more good years left in me, maybe.
I think it's remarkable that you can step into, they come from out of state. We've had a few folks come on here and talk about how their experiences was from out of state, but never really to the level of what you would have seen. And just not even on the national circuit, but just in North Carolina alone from 1992, which is when I graduated high school, by the way, to now the changes from 9/11 and COVID and everything else in between. I can imagine, or maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you've had to maybe how did you prepare for that? I mean, no one plans for 9/11 before 9/11. Nobody plans for a pandemic. And usually those things are makers or breakers of a career, but
Right.
you're one of those that will have seen probably the institution of 12 leads. You probably, I don't know that 12 leads was around in 92, so you would have seen that happen. You would have seen capnography happen. You would have seen 9/11 happen, and how has that impacted you in your management strategy, or has it even impacted you or your strategies?
I think some of the important parts of that are having well-trained staff, having an outlook that's an all hazards outlook, and having an organization, and of course all organizations are made of people, that is very resilient and adaptable and agile and things like that. And I think that's the way we have. I think that's one of the things EMS is really good at in general. But I think in our case in particular, that is how we successfully navigated some of those things.
Remember your first interview for promotion?
I'm not sure I had an interview, but but when I became an EMT3 in Oregon, which is cardiac tech, most everybody I worked with didn't have that high of certification. So I'm like 19 years old and I'm like the crew chief. Essentially, we didn't call him that then, of course, but I'm essentially the crew chief over these older folks because I have the highest certification. So I guess that was my interview per se. Then sometime later, I was made the the supervisor over a station, and it was a little place on the Oregon coast that you know, during the summer was super busy, but during the winter you just sort of cowered in the rain all the time, you know. But that was sort of my next step, and I'm sure someone talked to me about that, but it's not like now where we have assessment centers and things like that. You know, I think, you know, you've seen over the years, I'm sure, that people who were technically proficient in EMS got made to be supervisors, and perhaps that was one of the problems we had, is because just because you're the best paramedic doesn't mean you're the best supervisor, right?
Right.
But I'm not sure we realized that back then, you know. I'm going to say I was the best paramedic and the best supervisor, but that's probably not true.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because that's one of the things we touch on a lot, is how, you know, we probably have had this practice of promoting really good paramedics and putting them in positions and maybe setting them up for failure. Terry, you talk about that a lot. Did you have some thoughts? I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, as usual, John and I have complementary thought processes with this, and it's easy to fall down that trap. And so, what's a piece of advice we've seen turnover with new agencies, with new directors, and to part of our idea with this podcast is passing out that knowledge, that institutional knowledge. And so, what advice would you have for that young director, that new director, maybe that person who says, I'm a really awesome paramedic, that should make me a great supervisor? So that same advice, even though it's different sides of the coin, I think it is kind of similar. So what advice would you have for those people that have that thought process?
Well, I think those days are gone, honestly. I think being a great paramedic certainly could lead you to be a great officer, but I don't necessarily think they go hand in hand. I think they're two parallel skill sets. And if you're good at one, you could very well be good at the other, but I don't think they necessarily go hand in hand. So I think that to be a good supervisor, just like to be a good paramedic, you have to study paramedicine. To be a good supervisor, you have to study leadership and supervision. So
Yeah, I would say I agree with you 100% on that. Is maybe over the last 5 or 6 years, at least as we've traveled the state, we're starting to see that people are getting that. It's like now how good a paramedic isn't necessarily going to um, make you or break you at a supervisor level. How good of a supervisor you are going to do that, and that's it's like an evolution. It's like once you achieve being a proficient paramedic and you'd like to be an FTO, well, studying, training specifically and how to deal with generational differences and maybe knowing a little bit more about the education stuff is going to be in your wheelhouse. And maybe running a shift is even a different wheelhouse. You know, it's not the same as an FTO. Like you could be really good at FTO and probably not run a shift well, or you might be really good at running a shift and not really be good at teaching students. So it's not just paramedic officer. I think it's the level of officer that you may be. You know, you have to study that specificness to I would say that task that you have. Would you agree with it?
yeah, absolutely. We have some great paramedics clinically. And some of them are very good teachers in terms of being an FTO. And some of them, they don't want to be a teacher. They just want to go be a great paramedic.
Yeah.
Want to be a great clinician. And I would agree that there's different skill sets at different levels about you know, some people would love to be a paramedic, some people would love to be an FTO, but those people might not all want to be a shift supervisor because it's a whole different sort of ball of wax.
Has Gaston EMS, since you've been there, is it always been a local government based EMS system?
Yes.
So with that being in mind, coming from Oregon, I don't know if you come from like if it was rescue squad or whatnot, but speaking specifically into coming to North Carolina, having to deal with local government to that level. I mean, stepping in, you didn't, I would say, doesn't sound like you had the opportunity to come in and be a FTO or a training officer or a supervisor and work your way into how's that going to look in North Carolina. You got the politics all at once of having to deal with it from the highest level one had to deal with. Would you say over time, learning the politics of local government has become easier or harder over time, or does it fluctuate?
I think it's certainly more complex than it used to be. And I think it was hard then, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
when I got hired, my new boss told me, basically, I'll let you do whatever you want 90% of the time, but 10% of the time when I tell you this is what you're going to do, that's what you're going to do. And sometime not too long after I was here, we were he had said we're going to change medical directors because there was some political issue before I got here, and I'm like making a pitch for the guy who was the medical director because everybody really liked him, and he calls me and he says, you remember that talk we had when I hired you? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, this is one of those 10%. So I'm like, okay, you know.
I think that's a great hey, I'm going to define the rules for you, defining expectations. And we talk a lot about making sure that your people have expectations of you and you have expectations of them and communicating that.
I think that's really important too. In fact, Thursday morning we had a group of new people in orientation, and one of the things we talk about is our mission, vision. I talk about is our mission, vision, and values. But I have this whole page of expectations that we hand out to all new people as well, and I go down those one by one and sort of explain them, not just hey, here they are, but here's what they mean to me. You know.
And I think that's probably like a missing element we have, you know, because we talk about recruitment all the time, and we always throw the word retention behind that, but we don't really do anything a whole lot about that. And the first key to being successful as an agency to help retain those employees is setting those clear expectations from day one, from the chief, having that list of things. Hey, this is what thou shalt, this is what thou shouldn't, this is what's expected of you from day to day. And you can't argue that.
Interesting. You talk about retention because that's something we're struggling with, both recruitment and retention, and we've done fairly well compared to some places, but there's still very real struggles. And one of the things that we're getting ready to do is working with our county human resources department so that it is not one of our officers doing it, to go around and basically do what's going to be a stay interview with all of our personnel, like every single person that works there.
You like that, Terry? You agree with that?
I think you did a thing with Terry.
We'll see how Mark, if he slices in my reaction to that. Stay interviews, that is such a non when we look at systems and characteristics of things, that is a very non-local government characteristic, that stay interview, because it can be it's new and it's different and people don't understand it. And so some people might not know what you mean when we say doing a stay interview. And so if you're willing to just break that down real quick for what some of the things you're looking at or asking or just kind of the basic premise for a stay interview.
Sure. We actually haven't finalized the questions yet, but essentially it's, what's good about working here? What would you change if you could? Tell me about issues or things that we could make better for you to continue to work here and things like that. And what I hope that we're going to do is sort of ask some positive questions and some what I would call negative questions. And I don't really mean positive and negative, but and I don't mean this literally, but tell me 3 good things about working here. Tell me 3 bad things about working here. But the questions would really be designed not in that way, but in a way to sort of like if you're doing a SWOT analysis, what's the good things about working here? Thank you. And what are our opportunities to improve? You know, how can we make this better for everybody?
Well, it is a SWOT analysis. I mean, from that.
And those are good. And I have had, if they're used appropriately, that they're good. And I'm glad some agencies are starting to pick that up, because we've had a few agencies that I'm familiar with that have done that. And some of the things that they have had, and the technicians have said this, is I don't trust the boss. I don't trust the supervisors. I don't trust the county manager at this point in time. Am I going to get fired for that? And I think you have to go into that as a open, and having someone like the HR director doing it, that really, or somebody from the HR department doing it, they're just gathering data for you, so you're getting that. I think you have a better chance of getting that true roundabout system of how it is, if you put the county manager or the HR director, or the county manager and the HR director, if you put the supervisor, somebody there. I think it does kind of sway, because people are scared to talk at that point in time.
Right. We have, my view is that anybody should get to say anything they want to, as long as they own it. But some people, I don't know if it's generational or what, but some people would not like to stand up and say, I believe X, Y, Z, but
Right.
They get that keyboard courage sometimes. And yeah.
But we have to foster that environment, right? You have to, if it is, like you said, generational, I mean, your Gen Zers, they're not going to have that. Maybe they're not going to feel that confidence to do that. Maybe even some of the sub-millennials don't feel that confidence. I don't think Gen X ever had a problem speaking up. You came in 92, you were in the heat of Gen X workforce coming through there. And so, Chief, you could probably speak more to watching the generations of the boomers and the X having to deal with each other, the millennials coming in, and now Gen Z. So you might could speak more specifically to that. But I would say, just in my experience, the X never had a problem saying whatever they thought. Millennials had to have time and trust. And how do you teach a Gen Zer trust in what sometimes could be viewed as a low trust environment?
right. Yeah, when I came to work, the bulk of the workforce was baby boomers, and then we started switching over gradually, and then it was by far millennials. And now I'm in this little tiny minority, and there's even the millennials are starting to get to be a smaller percentage as these others become more prevalent. So it's been interesting in terms of how to best talk to people and how to best deal with people and things like that.
And what you guys call a stay interview in the community college, I know that we do these meetings that we call one-on-ones. And so when I was listening to different folks talk about how they do stay interviews, I was like, that's very similar to the corporate world's one-on-one where you're keeping up with them. Maybe it's not as personal. I don't know, because when I get into the one-on-one conversations with folks, it's usually, how's things going or whatnot. And I don't know that we ask the question, what do you like about your job? What you hate about your job? So maybe that is one of the differences about it. It's more or less just making sure everybody's comfortable with the workload they have, and that home life is good and there's a good balance between those things. So, and Walter, do you do one-on-ones? I mean, you're so closely connected to everybody there anyway. I mean, the
We do,
one-on-one is
but
just going to dinner, right?
we
Going to
do,
lunch.
but not as a. I mean, we don't do one-on-ones per se. We talk to each other, but we don't do per se one-on-ones that are reporting on a form or anything showing that we did it.
Yeah. Yeah. Chief, I was looking. I'm actually going to call you out a little bit on. I went to your webpage, and one of the things that I was looking at is you have a message. This was interesting to me. Is you have basically from the chief, you have a statement on your webpage. It just goes into hey, this is the purpose of our website. This is our, and you actually go over this preserve life and promote safety and go over the values there so that anybody coming into your agency has full, not just coming into your agency, anybody can pull this up and look at it. And there's a few agencies out there that believe they've developed their own mission statement beyond what the county's mission statement is. They've got their own vision, they got their own values, they got their key phrases and stuff. But yours is so well put together that I think it's the framework others could follow and stuff. And was, let me ask you this, was this a you idea or was this something the county said, hey, put something together?
The original one that's on the website, and actually it probably needs to be updated, but because we had a mission, vision, and values before the county wrote a mission, vision, and values statement.
Gotcha.
So since then the county has done that, and we didn't change our values. What we did is we fit them within the framework of the county's value statements, and we fit our mission in with the framework of the county's mission statement. So interestingly enough, we just recently and I doubt if it's on the webpage yet, so shame on us for that, but we just recently revised our mission and vision statements because what we had on there was kind of, I don't know, I hate to use the phrase old school EMS, but I'll say traditional EMS. And we're doing so much stuff with community paramedics and things like that. We started our community paramedic program focusing mainly on homebound vaccinations during COVID, and also sort of a side focus of high frequency utilizers.
Mm-hmm.
And, the homebound vaccinations kind of went away. Now we have a very strong focus on high frequency utilizers. Every Monday morning, the community paramedics put out a list of anybody who's called more than 10 times in the last week, 5 times in the last week, or 10 times in the last month. And we kind of zero in on those. They try to go out and do prospective visits to those people. Sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. But we've also started a big focus. The county, like most counties, got some opioid money. And so we're doing we just started an MAT program a few months back, and we're getting ready to start an MAT program in the jail. But we actually have opioid transporters, or recovery transporters is what their real title is, that once they get off our temporary MAT treatment, when they're hooked up with a definitive treatment center, if they don't have a ride, we'll take them back and forth in our minivans to the treatment centers and things like that. So doing a lot of things that aren't traditional EMS per se.
Well, and do y'all have an in-county hospital in Gaston?
Yes, it's Caramont Regional Medical Center, and they have a freestanding ED, and they're also building a second hospital in the county as well.
Is it part of a health system or is it a county based?
No, it's actually one of the last freestanding hospital systems around.
Gotcha.
So hearing some of these things, the advancements that you've been doing, and knowing that you've been at Gaston, I just have the morbid, not really, but I'm just how many employees was Gaston EMS 32 years ago, and what is the size of that department today? And I've got a follow up to that. So
I think, if I remember, it was 46 people in 1992, including me and everybody else. And right now we're at about 190.
Wow.
That's a pretty significant growth over that time. And so as you're bringing in community paramedics, we're doing this MAT piece, as we're doing all these things. What is it's easy to dilute your culture down, and I have some ideas, because how you maintain a culture over that 32 years. And I mean, some of the dead giveaways are hearing from you, hey, we just had a crop of new employees, and I sat down with them for a couple of hours and gave my expectations as the chief of the department, and I've got the points that I want to talk about, and it's very. I know a couple of chiefs in the state who do that, and I know a couple who would have never thought to do that. But as you bring people in, and you can have that dilution, you can bring in maybe a culture that you don't want. How do you maintain your culture as that agency that's so well respected?
Well, that's certainly been a sort of an ongoing battle over the years. I mean, we've had to really work at it. And so maybe battle isn't the right word, but that has not come easily, and it still doesn't come easily. You know, I think the analogy is sort of like a pot of soup or a pot of stew. If I bring in these new people, these extra ingredients, is that going to make my pot of stew better, or is it going to make my pot of stew worse? You know?
Exactly.
And obviously, we're always trying to make that pot of stew better, you know? But, you know, it's been tough. I mean, we really had to work at it. And I think one of the things that we do is try to keep that in front of everybody all the time. The side of our ambulance has a short version of our mission statement on it. You open up any of the back doors, right side or two back doors of our ambulances, you'll find the short version of our value statements in a placard on the door. And our vision is on our challenge coins and other places and things like that. One of the things that I think we made business cards for all of our personnel who wanted them. Not everybody has them, but we encourage them to take pride in their work and say, kind of at the end of the call, hey, here's my card. It was a pleasure taking care of you today. If you need anything, you know, let me know, whatever. And on the back of it is a QR code for a satisfaction survey. So that's one of the things we do. We also started making trading cards for our people. So, you know, like baseball trading cards. So they could give them out to kids and things like that, you know, to help take pride in what they do, you know.
Pretty
I
interesting.
like that idea.
I do too.
I like that. I like that.
See, mine would be collectible, like baseball cards. Do you have this 1 year version of it,
That's
or this
right.
1 year? So
I mean, like your business cards.
yeah, well, I do. I was actually in one of my vehicles earlier today and found my College of the Albemarle business card. I started to take a picture of it and send it to Walter
Should have.
for memory's sake. What's the call volume like in Gaston? And I'll tell you what, since Terry asked that other question, what was the call volume, if you can remember, what was the call volume like in the 90s, like, and compared to now? Do you remember that?
I'm trying, as you started to ask that question, I'm trying to remember, but I think we were in maybe the 2000, on a busy month, we're in the 2000 a month range. I'm not even sure it was that, to be honest with you. I'm having a hard time remembering that. But right now, as far as we measure both responses and specific incidents, you know, obviously some incidents we send more than one truck to, or we send a supervisor to, and things like that. So specific or individual incidents, we're right at 50,000, just under 50,000. And responses were pushing about 70,000.
Big differences over time. And as many folks saw, we got an opportunity to see one of your many tools that, you know, just recently we were at Expo in Greensboro, and Gaston had half the floor in there with just gas and stuff. And that's been going on for several years. Gaston has nice tools that they bring to the conference and whatnot. But you know, that MCI 18-wheeler, I mean, I don't know that I've seen that in North Carolina so much. And to have support, I mean, to me, I know you have uses for it. You'll train with it. They'll be there when the event. what we hope never happens, but it'll be there if someone, if something does like happen. But just, to me, when I see things like that, it just speaks to the support you must have at Gaston. I mean, you don't get that just because you alone are good. You get that because you provide good service, and you've got politicians willing to support EMS and get and push the support for that financially.
Right. Yeah, our county certainly isn't a wealthy county, but we have great support. And some of those things we really have to work at, from sort of vision to getting that truck here was the better part of 20 years.
Wow.
But I think that's one of the important parts is let's envision this, we have the MedCat. I think we came down to Elizabeth City a few years ago with sheriff's office and somebody's Bearcat, right, Terry?
I think so, but I'm not 100% correct on that, Chief.
Okay. At any rate, because of all these school shootings and because of some deployments that we've seen in a number of places, that was a need that we had. The county police, we're also the only county that still has a county police department, along with the sheriff's office. And the county police, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so non-North Carolina, but please.
What do you mean? Explain those words. What's the county police department?
So it's literally one of the departments of the county is a county police department. Another department of the county is, although headed by an elected official, is the sheriff's office. And they have different, but somehow somewhat overlapping duties.
It's very Maryland or Virginia. You don't find it traditionally south of the North Carolina Virginia border of where you have
Mason-Dixon line. Terry,
no, the Mason-Dixon line separates Maryland and Pennsylvania, but yeah, where you have that overlapping, where you have a county. Hey, I'm somewhere in my county, and I dial 911, and a county police officer shows up instead of a sheriff's deputy. And in those counties, like up north, it's usually the sheriff's department does the jail and court security, and yeah, maybe they do some patrol, or maybe the sheriff is running drugs, something or another, or some sort of task force. But it's something that I'm familiar with from being some sort of Yankee come down here, I guess, to burn the crops and slaughter the animals.
Yeah.
But
Go
yeah.
home. Go home, Terry.
Now, Martin, do y'all have any other police departments in the area, in your county?
There's several municipal police departments as well. Gastonia being the largest, but several other municipals.
And your EMS agency also does some rescue tech.
Yeah,
runs rescue tech, right?
We do. We're a little behind at this point because of COVID and some turnover and things like that. We actually had to resort to doing boot camp paramedic classes. We'd hire people in, hire them. The new hires were mainly backfills, and then we'd send some of our experienced EMTs to boot camp paramedic class for 6 or 7 months, and that was their job during that time, was just to go to class and be successful. And we actually even had to do a couple of EMT boot camp classes when we couldn't find EMTs to hire, but that's gotten a little better since then. But we do send all of our full-time people, eventually, it's not always right on like it used to be, to finish TR training, technical rescue training. And then whoever wants to can be part of what we call our STAR team, Special Tactics and Rescue Team, and they go for the additional classes. But we try to send all full-time paramedics to regular TR.
That is pretty interesting as well. Yeah, so Gaston is very unique and diverse, I think, in all the different type of stuff you guys have there. And that, to me, I wonder if that speaks to having someone that has been the chief for 32 years. Like it's not just a stopping point on the way to something else. You've made this your home. You've made it your thing. No doubt that you've got, your strategic plan in place and succession planning in place so that that stuff can carry on. And whoever eventually has to come in there, not from Oregon, more than likely will have some big shoes to fill when you have all these different things. Did you have a lot of input into how that system was developed, or did these things just exist and you expand them?
No, for the most part, we've started them over the last 30 years or so, but
Wow.
I think a lot of it is I had some great people to work with. I certainly didn't do this, by myself, but I think we had a vision from the start. I was a good Boy Scout, and the Boy Scout motto is "Be prepared." And since 9/11, you've seen the federal government come out with a white paper about all hazards EMS preparedness.
Mhm.
And I think we were doing that even before then. So I was glad to see that because it kind of put a stamp of approval on that. But I think that, EMS is being called more and more to, and I don't mean this literally, but be all things to all people. But there's a lot of niches that have to be filled. There used to be this argument about is it public safety or is it healthcare? And I would have definitely taken on the argument as it was public safety. But the truth is, in my opinion, I should say the truth is, at this point, it's that niche of these three interlocking circles of public health, general health care, and public safety. And if you draw those three circles so they intersect, in the middle of that is where EMS falls. We're kind of a little bit of all of those things.
Yeah, I have a strong belief and what I've been preaching for about the last 3 years to folks is that we are our own umbrella. And we don't fall under someone else's umbrella so much as something that they do falls under ours. And it goes to what you just said is we're very niche oriented. We are allied health and we are public safety and we are other things. So 100% on board with that as well. See, 1 year, first 32, we think a little bit.
That's right. Good job.
Yeah.
Just think of what you could do if you were someplace for 32 years instead of
Nah,
He would
32
be alive.
days.
He would be dead.
can't do
Some
it.
some employers
He would-
32 days.
He would not be with us in
He
real
would.
life, not be with us if he had to stay someplace for 32 years.
Chief, as we start to draw down, and I think we could probably go for another 42 minutes and having conversation, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface with some stuff. But when you talk about kind of the three different rings, I look at my life and I say, hey, I've got a couple of rings where I've got my John Wilson ring, I've got my Mark Casey ring, my Walter Meads ring as my three best friends. But sometimes we have to just pick one. And so if you had to say who was your best friend, who's your best friend?
As a person, my best friend,
Yeah, as a person.
not my wife, not my supervisor, not my subordinate.
I don't know. Some people's wives might pressure them.
Some people cop out and pick their wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would probably pick my wife in terms of my general best friend, because I think I've heard Terry's story. I think I'm a lot like him in some ways. But I'm great friends with my boss, and I'm great friends with the deputy chief. And I think I'm very good friends with most everybody else that works there. And I think that's I'm not saying they like everything I do, but I would say I love every one of them,